Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another episode of the Bible Nerd Podcast. I cannot wait because today I am starting a brand new series, a series on a book that I have wanted to record one on for quite some time now. And for some reason, just have not gotten around to. And what's interesting is I was looking back through my notes and really trying to decide on what I wanted to do next, and saw that I already had a couple of the lessons outlined for this and just never completed through it, and never decided to dive into it. So that's what I want to do today. And the series that we're going to start is one of my favorite books, Kurt Wise's Faith, Form, and Time. This is a book that I have mentioned quite a few times throughout the life of this podcast. And unfortunately, I'm not even sure how easy it is to get anymore. I have it on Kindle, and it looks like you cannot even get it on Kindle anymore. I checked on Amazon, and it's like $100 for a used paperback version. So I don't know. I mean, I kind of like if you're listening to this and you're interested in this topic, um, then I hope you can find it and try to find it. And if you have it, consider it a blessing and a privilege that you have it. So what this book is, it is one of my favorite creationist books. Now it's old, right? It's early 2000s, and the way science changes, of course, there are always going to be things that need to be updated, or they're maybe irrelevant or not as useful anymore. However, Dr. Wise's book is a little different. Now, don't get me wrong. Of course, there are still things in there that could use some updating, and there's also some new questions that we now have as a result of much of the work that's been done since that time. We also have some answers to some of the questions that were raised in the book, right? So, what I'm not going to do is sort of go like blow by blow through the book. Okay. I did that sort of thing with the Searching for Adam book way back in the beginning of this podcast. And I went chapter by chapter. And I don't know. I liked that. I think that I may do that sort of thing with other books going forward in the future as well. But for this book, what I had decided to do was just basically pull out some of the main important points throughout the book and then just share those with you as individual episodes here. So that's what we want to do. And the reason why I still think this book is relevant and important is because Dr. Wise is a very good thinker and a very biblical thinker. And what he talks about throughout the book, it always kind of ties back to a really philosophical look at creationism, right? A philosophy of science as it relates to creation science. And I think that's a very unique and interesting thing that he does. And so I thought it would be a great book, still relevant to go through, and that we would talk about it here on the podcast. And that would be a helpful series to go through to give you some good content. Look, if you're not interested in the creation stuff, cool. So maybe skip this series and go on to the next one. However, Dr. Wise is one of those creationists that I think if you're going to have an opinion on creation at all, you should really interact with his work because he is one of the, I would say, original model building sort of creationists of the modern era. Certainly, he's probably the OG new creationist, as they might be called. Kurt Wise and Todd Wood and Matt McLean, people like this who sort of are in this new creationism camp that we talk about from time to time. Dr. Wise is probably the oldie goldie, among the group, and so it's going to be a great book, I think. Now, Dr. Wise is a fantastic author, a fantastic teacher. He's so passionate. He's just, no matter what you feel, right, about his convictions as it relates to the creation issue, he's just it seems to be an awesome Christian guy, just looking from afar. Of course, I don't know him personally. I've never spoken to him, although I'd love to someday. But just to watch him teach, the passion with which he teaches about biology and about God's design and nature and about creation is just really, really awesome. You can go to YouTube and see some of the lectures that he's done at Truett McConnell University, which is where he teaches. And I don't know that you're actually seeing his lectures there. I think he's teaching more of gatherings, chapel services, and things like that. But he always does such a good job, and his passion always shines through. So you should definitely check that out. So the book is Faith, Form, and Time. Faith, Form, and Time. And I suppose here I could look up and see. I didn't even write down what the subtitle is here. I ought to have it memorized by now. I've read it so many times. So it's what the Bible teaches and science confirms about creation and the age of the universe. Okay. Faith, Form, and Time, what the Bible teaches and creation confirms about about creation and the age of the universe. Again, like I said, great book. Why this book though? Like of all the great books that we could choose, because there are other great creationist books, why this one? Okay. First of all, it's a great introduction to the model building approach of creation research. We've talked about this. Model building versus evolution bashing. And people sometimes get upset with me, right? Like when I talk about that or when I draw that distinction, but I have to be genuine about it. Yes, evolution, not good. Okay, wrong, bad. We should teach our children why it is not good. Absolutely right. However, we also need to spend equal, if not more time, I would say, on model building, on providing an alternative, on truly understanding God's world. And while I'm not sure this is something that we're going to directly cover from his book, a great point that I always remember him making in the introduction and beginning chapters of Faith, Form, and Time are just talking about the dominion mandate and how we really have a responsibility as humans, as God's people on earth to do God's work. We have this obligation to study nature, to study creation, to understand it, even to some degree to manipulate it, right, for God's glory, and to steward it well for God's glory. And so that's why science is important. And that's why, again, we need to be careful as creationists not to fall victim to the charge that all we do is tear down the other side. Okay? Yes, there's a place, but let's be sure to build up the creationist side. If you're interested in science, man, let's do it. My son, he is he's 5. He's 5. I've got 4 kids, 3 boys. So I have a 5-year-old son. He loves animals, and even more than that, loves dinosaurs. And he's just really he's maybe a little bit slower in understanding, or at least it was looking that way to start with, but now he's really starting to catch up and really getting interested. So I feel like I could even be even more passionate with him about dinosaurs from a creation perspective and really engage him in learning in that way. And so it's just super exciting to have that sort of thing. Develop that in your kids. My word, do you know how much I would love to see my boy grow up and become a creationist paleontologist like Dr. Wise is? That's what Dr. Wise does. And why, right? Well, because we need more. We need more people with a passion for God's creation and also with a firm commitment to the truth of a biblical creationist worldview. Man, when you have somebody who can hold those things in tandem and work with them together, then you have the recipe for just something awesome. And I think that because this book teaches that way, it's going to be very helpful for us. Okay, another reason why we're going to go with this book is because it's written by an honest, humble, and extremely intelligent scientist. I, to the extent possible, like to avoid arrogant, overly confident, and belligerent people. Okay, just in general, but especially when I'm engaging with the materials of authors or people who are trying to teach me. If you're arrogant, if you're overconfident, if you're belligerent, that sends a message. Okay. It sends a very particular kind of message. And again, here, I'm not calling anybody out. I'm just saying that over the course of time, there are creationists who have been known for being arrogant, a little belligerent, and very overconfident. And so I just try to avoid when I'm teaching. I usually find in general, again, I'm making a blanket statement here because I do believe it's true across the board. In general, and this is even confirmed by something psychologists call the Dunning-Kruger effect. In general, the more knowledgeable somebody is about a topic, the less confident they will be, or maybe I should say, the more tentative they will be in their conclusions. And the reason is because they realize that they are not omnipotent. Okay. So, what I like about Dr. Wise is he's very clear, very adamant, and very solid when it comes to this idea of, okay, like the Bible says it, that settles it, not wavering from that firm foundation. That's a given, that's an assumption of the work. Okay, now we have that. But as it relates to the science, as we now start doing the hard work, doing the scientific work of model building, etc., okay, we have this biblical framework laid out of sort of the boundary lines, in a sense, of where things need to land. But now we take an honest approach to the science and we ask questions that maybe other people wouldn't ask because they don't have the same quote unquote boundaries or limitations that we have. And so now we can be more exploratory. We can ask questions. We can be tentative in our conclusions. We can say, yeah, it looks like this model has problems. And it does nothing to shake the foundation of the truth of the Christian worldview. All right, we're not trying to prove the Christian worldview with science here. That's not what's trying to happen. And yet, what is interesting is that what Dr. Wise and others have found is that science confirms the biblical worldview. Again, when you're asking the right questions, when you are approaching the data in a humble way, and frankly, when you are spiritually engaged in this work. If you view this work as something spiritual, that's going to change everything about the way you actually perform the work. And Dr. Wise very clearly and evidently does that, which is why I so much appreciate this. Another reason we're going to cover this particular book is that it covers a wide gamut of useful information. Okay. A wide gamut of useful information. So across the spectrum of creationist work, there is obviously many different areas to cover. I mean, science is a huge topic. When you have somebody like Dr. Wise, so he's a paleontologist. So if you don't know, paleontology is what they call an integrated field. So it actually requires you to have essentially PhD level knowledge and work and experience under your belt as a geologist and then also as a biologist. And you mix those two together, and then you kind of form this in circle in the middle, if you will, of the paleontologist. Okay, and so the paleontologist has to be an expert in biology and also in geology, which again becomes very clear if you spend any time at all engaging with many of the resources that Dr. Wise is available on. Which quick plug for the Is Genesis History folks. They've got a lot of stuff on YouTube of Dr. Wise talking and teaching, and also some things you can buy as well. Go to isgenesishistory.com. It's like $5 to get 70 plus creation lectures. I always recommend this to people. It's a fantastic buy. And definitely worth your $5. Promise you. Okay. And so but given that, right, again, Dr. Wise is just a very smart guy and a very smart scientist, and he's very philosophically inclined. So I find that some authors tend to attempt a coverage of the wide gamut, but they have very, very limited knowledge in each of those areas. Dr. Wise, I mean, of course, he's a specialist in his area, but I think to some extent, he may be a little bit of an exception to that rule. I would say that he is very well studied across and this is again my perception, but it's my podcast, so it's why I'm just telling you why I chose this book. My perception of the issue is that he is able to cover the wide gamut of issues in such a way that is, I think, better and more thorough than the way that some other people do it. So there's a lot of useful information here that transcends the different boundaries of biblical and scientific research. Again, it's not just a biology book. It's not just a geology book. It spans a wide gamut of information that I think you're going to find useful and very, very helpful. And then finally, the final reason why we are going to dive into different concepts and things from this particular book is that it is highly theological and devotional in its content and motivation. Let me say that again. It's highly theological and devotional, both in content and in motivation. If you don't know, one of the more recent books, might be the most recent book that Dr. Wise has authored, is actually a biology textbook called Devotional Biology. And with everything that Dr. Wise does, there is, again, always this sense that it's coming back to the spiritual, okay? We're not doing what we're doing in some sort of box, right? In some sort of, like, for example, following methodological naturalism or philosophical naturalism, right? These are ideas that sort of exclude the supernatural from any sort of discussion of this. What Dr. Wise realizes and tries to really show in his book is that this exercise is fundamentally spiritual. Okay. It we only have really a rational basis for even doing this sort of hard work, this sort of discovery, if in fact there is a God who created us. And so everything that happens, everything that we talk about throughout the series, it's always going to come back to God and his glory and his greatness as the creator, and us actually giving pause to honor him in that way, and to realize that what we're doing is only because of him, that it's only possible because of him, that it's only logical or even rational ultimately because of him. So this episode, more than anything, is just to give you a basic introduction and to really get you pumped up for this series. The next episode that we're going to cover is sort of the first concept from the book. If we do find a way to be able to follow along, maybe either you bought it on Kindle from hearing me recommend it a while ago, or maybe you could try to find it used online somewhere. The first one that we're going to cover is from page 13, and we're going to talk about intentional ambiguity in God's creation, right? Like, people talk about the hiddenness of God, right? We talk about how some people can see God in creation, but then other people, it seems, can't see God in creation, or at least they say they can't see God in creation, or maybe even they admit that they just won't see God in creation. So we're going to talk about that. Again, the author frames it as this intentional ambiguity, like God did this on purpose. It's some things are intentionally ambiguous, and why? Why would that happen? Very interesting concept from the book. Again, we're going to pull it out of page number 13. So if you find a way to follow along, I want you to give you this week to be able to prepare and find it if you're interested in this. And I'm so looking forward to this. I can't believe we haven't done this before now, because it really is one of my favorite creationist books. And I think it's just going to be a blast to go through and to talk about. So look, God bless. I hope you're psyched up for this series. I know that I am, and I can't wait to see you next week here on the Bible Nerd Podcast. God bless. You guys have a fantastic week.